Alright, hopefully everyone can actually see the stream. Well, I hope everyone can see the stream, but give me a minute. give me a little bit of time right now. I actually want to open up another tab. I wanted to talk about something else. So I'll pull that stuff up now. What am I gonna pull up? I'll pull this one up. I'll pull this up. And we'll talk about like the tropical system, the channel as a whole. Talk about that as well. And I guess we talk about other stuff too. It just really depends what you guys want to talk about. I don't know what you guys want to talk about, but I'm here just in case you guys want to talk about anything. I'll be doing this for about like maybe an hour or two. I'm not quite sure. This is not what I want. Hold on. I'm gonna need something else. I need another page. Give me a second. Okay. This is what I want to pull up, right? Yes, okay. I found the page I want to pull up. Okay, that's good. You got it now? Okay. Yeah, I can finally, like, I don't know why Steam keeps opening, but I can finally open up. Finally open up stream view. I think everything should pop up. Let me just check my TV. See if it does. Okay, so we're about like a 5 to 10 second like relapse time, which isn't bad. It could be better, you know, but I think this is fine. Okay. First thing, I did just publish the changes I made to the website that I did when I think about 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago when I actually finally like got the message when I contacted I think Dawn's friend about like what happened, and then I got the message, and then I pretty much assumed it was suicide. So I marked on the official website that Dawn's officially deceased. However, I didn't actually get to add any of their art yet because I've been lazy the past few weeks. For Worse than AI, I did add a Pix AI link. But for Dawn's stuff, I need to go back to Discord and go through every single one of her pictures that she sent, and then upload them all to an art dashboard that you guys can just look through. And then that should make it a whole lot easier. At least on me, right? Because then, if I need to reference something, I just go to the website and like say, okay, search for this photo, and then it's there. I have the coding, but if I put it in like a carousel format, it will be easy to find it because I'll be able to order it properly. So, for those who don't know, Dawn probably passed away July 9th was the last day that they were sending stuff. However, it's most likely that they did their suicide attempt on July the 10th. And I'm not sure if it was successful or not. They're not online. So we will assume that it was successful. So that means that they're no longer going to be posting out posting because they're not live. And that also means because of what they said in their message, we're going to have to figure out what we want to do with the art. Because their birthday was supposed to come up on August 6th, which is coming up this week, which is in 2 days. The question is, what will we do with the art? What I was personally thinking of is either like doing two things: preserving the 3D art that she created using Gary's mod, and they were trying to learn Source Filmmaker, but I don't think they got through that in time. So I think we preserve it here, and then maybe when I think I have a computer that can render, but we'll probably look like down the line when I get an even better computer that can render stuff super well, is when I will try and recreate the stuff that she tried to make. So, for example, when we're talking about the KB bot and the Inhuman mod, because she also had like a permanent ink idea, I'll try and like write a lore story and incorporate almost everything that she said into it. So we'll drag it in and we'll put it in like a lore pot that we'll use later. So we'll drag the ideas, we'll put in like a lore pot, and then we'll expand the lore around the channel with those ideas to give homage to them for like their contributions to the channel and just keep like their legacy going. Hey Jared, what's going on? That's what I'm thinking, at least. I was also thinking like maybe I could learn to draw the art. Although that might take time. That's probably going to take a bit of time to do that. It would be worth it. Besides that, I don't see too many other ways to really preserve their legacy. Because I think maybe from like maybe July 9th to like August 6th, I could do a monthly thing for the channel, like remembering them. And like their moments, and we could like go back to certain streams like where they had like fun, find the best moments. That's probably what we'll do. And then make stuff based around that. Other than that, though, just like adding them to lore, having a time slot like carved out for them. Because I didn't do the Christmas in July thing this year because my brain skipped because I was lazy. And I was streaming like Party or War. A lot of channel events, I actually want to make sure that I'm actually doing them, especially now that I'm going into college soon. So I want to be able to get those things done within a timely fashion and make the channel actually feel alive instead of it having be like, it's alive sometimes or it's really there. Sometimes it's a little less active, like it was like a few weeks ago. And then times like now, like for the past week or two, where I haven't like uploaded anything. Speaking of which, if I can find the music section, I'd like that. There we are. Okay. For music, I hope this doesn't play any audio. I think it might play audio, but I'm not sure. I hope it doesn't. Okay, so for individual releases for music, I plan to release the track. I plan to release the Major Hurricane song sometime this week. What I'll probably just do, because it's pretty much finished, all I have to do is just make the second verse after a chorus sound a bit better. But once that's finished, I'll upload it to YouTube so you guys can listen to it. I'll also work on more songs because we don't have that many songs actually on the channel. So we have Lazy Space, we have Proxibit, we have Scanning the Sewer. I think we have another one that's on the channel. I think it's Curb Song, so it's 4. So this would be the 5th song. I plan to get more out because I was supposed to get Nye uploaded in June and a bunch of other songs, but I never actually got to them. So all the tropical system storms are going to try and get those done this month. Complete them, make sure they're all like completely filled out and sound good. I'll make sure that I get Nye out this month as well. So I believe that's about, I think, 4 extra songs on top of what we already have. And Major Hurricane, which I just mentioned. So if those 4 dropped. And then maybe if I want, I could develop more music. I might have less time to do it. Although technically, like, when I do go into like college, even though I'd probably be occupied in the morning, that's not usually when I do stuff anyway. Because I'm usually asleep in the morning, so it actually gives me something to do. So I'd probably still have enough time to stream and create music. It just will really depend on how well I'm actually good at time organizing. Because if I don't organize my time correctly, I'm going to be screwed. But if I can organize my time correctly, then I should be fine, and you guys shouldn't like notice any like real disruption in content or anything like that. So that's one thing. AI, I don't know what I'm gonna do with that for the channel, to be honest. Like, I might use it for like more like banners or something. Although learning to draw is probably the best thing right now. What I probably do is like, since I have a bunch of edits on PicMonkey that I used of like pictures like from games or like real people that I edited, I did try and see what that would do for an AI, but it didn't really do anything. So I've noticed that it's not too great because it copies exactly like it doesn't copy exactly what you do, but like the style of PicMonkey, like with the tracing and the shading not being like super optimal. Because of that, it takes that into its like training data, and it trains off that. So almost all the images look like that, where, yeah, it has like all the features that I want, but it still looks like my hand, like, you know. And I want it to be a little bit more refined than that. So that's something I gotta work on. Definitely. So maybe I transition to, like, maybe either learning how to do photo editing better, which could be really good for thumbnails, or work harder on actually learning to draw myself would be a good option. At least that's how I'm thinking of it. That would be a good option. At least looking at channel analytics, videos are pretty rare. For Trenches, I was supposed to upload more videos, but these longer form videos that I have, these videos here, almost all of them are longer form if they're not music. Like the Trench battle, I've realized that was only a gigabit video, so I can empty a lot of my computer storage on here, and if there's a Trench battle that lasts for what? Maybe it lasts to like day 30 and I'm still like on the computer, I could record all that while I'm playing, and it'd probably only be maybe at most 10 gigabits, and then I just upload that straight to YouTube with like the beginning and end cut off, and then have it labeled, like, try to explain like what happens in the battle. Maybe I add timestamps for each day. That's probably something I should do. So if I add a timestamp for each day, if you want to watch something specific, like maybe the tank spam rush that Rostra or Adu Shasha does against Oskavia, for example, on whatever map it tends to be, and you're really excited about that, you get to skip right to that part because it's in a specific day where it happens. You don't have to glide through the entire video like, I don't exactly know where it is, and then you find it, luckily, after you like skim through everything. It's not what I want to happen. I want at least a timestamp for everything. Now that will require me to actually go through the videos and like watch them and make sure that, oh, okay, this is where X is, and make sure it's actually working. So I don't know how timestamps work just yet, but if I can make it work, if I can learn how they operate and then put them into the video successfully, then it should be good. Because then the trenches videos will be... These aren't meant to be like commentary videos where I discuss the game. This is just where like you watch the battle and you just like see, okay, this is cool. Or you learn something like trenches, and if there's a specific question that people have, I can answer them in the comment section. Like, why did you build this trench here when you could have easily built it up further ahead where it mattered more? Questions like that I could probably answer very well. As far as like a roadmap will go, I'm thinking maybe I go back to doing more videos concerning weather and COVID. Maybe I do more videos relating to like more serious topics as like a separate thing for the channel. Not me making a second channel overall, but having like a better overall thing. Overall like playlist everything so people can find stuff easier. So can I ask you something? Should I confess to my crush on Tuesday? I think you should, yeah. I mean, if it's like one of those times where like you're meeting them and it's like pretty rare, or just in general, I would say yeah. You have the feeling, so I would go for it. I don't know too much about romantic relationships, but that's personally what I would do. If the opportunity is there, I would go for it. Just make sure you feel right doing it. Tracing back a little bit. You're welcome. Tracing back a little bit. Serious topics I'll probably do more. Especially with like the major I'm going into where it's biomedical engineering where I will be dealing with actual health that people have to, actual health products. Not with patients themselves, with like actual health products, learning how to build those. It's going to be important for me to learn to actually communicate stuff like this to people. Communicate this effectively. And then also pull up other studies, like read more studies relating to disease and actually understanding it. So that way I can write a script for videos that explain how and why certain things happen. So like if I wanted to try and tell people that after you, like when you have COVID-19 or after it, that you don't want to exercise because it makes you more susceptible to long COVID, I have to say why and how, because I know that it increases your risk because COVID when you exercise affects your cardiovascular system. So putting more pressure on yourself, especially since cardiovascular system and like your respiratory system and your nerves are a big way of how you actually function. If those things are already compromised due to your infection, exercising therefore is going to put you at more risk or even cause you to collapse later. So you don't want to do exercise during or immediately after. And even after maybe a 2 or 3 week period, you want to slowly ramp it up and not go right back to what you were doing. If I can successfully explain that to people and explain transmission risk and where people are safe, where you aren't, be able to communicate that effectively to people, and also talk about other effects in society and other topics like this, like tropical weather and just weather in general, and be able to relate the two. Like, okay, so we have tropical system name, insert name here. It's going to cause a lot of flooding or wind damage in X spot. So this would mean a lack of services, lack of ways out, heavy damage, maybe wildlife intrusion, pollution, and then just a general rise in infectious diseases because there's not as much water being cleaned at wastewater treatment plants. It also can mean that you want access to medication that you need, less testing. You might not have power. You might not have electricity to be able to stay. Might not have electricity to be able to sleep comfortably at night. You'll probably be more cramped around other people, so the chance of you contracting diseases goes up because of that. Being able to communicate those things together really helps. Really helps sell the message of like what you're trying to do. I feel like it really helps being able to do that. Like saying, like be able to say like what you mean. If I can actually successfully do that, I'll be in a very good position to actually help people. Which is what I want to do. Right? That's what I want to do, right? For other things, I guess we could segue this into like the discussion about Debbie right now. Debbie was a storm, well, a tropical wave that was in the main development region out here. And it was a large circulation that gradually moved westward and started developing. Once it approached Cuba specifically, we're not quite sure how the mountains impacted it, but the mountains probably helped it a little bit with getting its vorticity together. And it became a tropical depression just south of Cuba, I believe. It went over Cuba, then developed a center just south of Cuba, went over the western tip of Cuba, and now is in the Gulf heading towards the Big Bend of Florida. If I could draw it, I wish I could. I can, just going to take a bit because this pen app is slow. This pen app is really slow. Would not recommend. Or this might be my computer slow. But, in general, the storm overall position, like the energy, I would say it's moved pretty much like this. And this is where it is now. And in the future, it's supposed to do something like this tomorrow morning as it makes landfall on the Big Bend of Florida, cross over Georgia into the South Carolina area, get over here, and then from that point, there's big uncertainty of where it goes in this region. But regardless of whether the storm is inland or over water, you're going to get onshore winds that blow like this onto the coastline. Let's get black here. That blow like, not like that. Let's delete that. That blow like this onto the coastline. While you have heavy rain. Actually, go back. Well, I think the highlighter is where. It's highlighter. While you have heavy rain along the Carolinas here. And into Georgia. You could also kind of extend this up the East Coast, to be fair. So, you're going to have heavy rain in this green area. You're going to have a high storms. You're going to have storm surge problems in these areas as well. So, just in general, the issue of Debbie is that right now it's not necessarily rapidly intensifying because of dry air and a little bit of westward shear that's ingesting dry air into the system. So it can't rapidly intensify because of that. But it's still steadily organizing to the point where it will still be a hurricane at landfall tomorrow morning, if not a Category 2 hurricane, if it really gets its act together. Right? But as it's doing so, it's going to slow down as it approaches landfall, and it's going to really slow down once it gets across the Florida Peninsula and makes it off the southeast coast, specifically off the Georgia and South Carolina coast. Once it gets there, depending on where it is, if it's closer to land, It will probably not be a strong system if it makes a second landfall. If it's over land, the storm will continue weakening wind-wise, but the water rainfall will probably be a bit heavier since the center is right on top of you. And if the storm's a little farther offshore, that will give it more time to actually re-intensify and maybe achieve hurricane status for a second time before making landfall somewhere in the Carolinas, where it could make landfall maybe North Carolina, eastern North Carolina in like extreme cases. It could just be hugging southeast Georgia the entire time, or it can make a landfall somewhere in South Carolina, right? But the statement's basically the same. No matter where the storm is, rainfall is going to be the big problem. As do a lot of this area right into here, right into the Carolinas and southeast Georgia. You're approaching rainfall that's about 16 to 20 inches of rain. I'm not quite sure what the millimeter calculation is for that. But I know it's pretty high. It's probably closer to about like 300, 400 maybe. Maybe higher. But that amount of rain, especially in an area that's been soaked for at least the past 2 weeks or more, and in a relatively quick time span, and with an onshore wind flow from the ocean with a large fetch, keeping the water on the coastline piled up, so it's harder for the rainwater that gets into the rivers to escape. That's going to make a flooding disaster that's going to be really hard to manage, especially for like the state and for just regular people. It's going to be very hard to manage because the actual ocean is keeping all that water locked onto the land. But the heavy rainfall on the land is 20, maybe even 30 inches in isolated pockets. Actually, like right on the coast, like next to Charleston. That water doesn't have anywhere to go, so it's really only going to combine with whatever storm surge you do get, which the storm surge in South Carolina is looking to be about 4 to 6 feet. If I check like one of these graphics down here, I think it's like storm surge inundation. Should be here somewhere. I think it's this. But we'll look at peak surge. Like 2 to 4 feet now, but it's definitely probably going to increase. But that amount of water being pushed onto normally dry ground, plus rainfall that's looking at least above 16 inches in this area, that's going to cause big problems. And this is not going to be a storm where the wind is the big issue. It's going to be more of a water storm that causes billions of dollars of damage, maybe tens of billions of dollars of damage if it gets bad enough, where the water really has nowhere to go. And if we're extending this into a longer range forecast, like at least like maybe to a week, this rain spreads up the coast because it goes all the way up to like the border of Virginia up here. This is a large area of land that's going to receive heavy rainfall, and there's not many places for that water to actually go. So it's going to be a major issue for those states, in addition to whatever damage happens in Florida from an intensifying hurricane, 6 to 10 feet storm surge along the Big Bend coast, in addition to still heavy rainfall falling there. Now, a worst case scenario is if the storm like moves offshore a bit, so it has enough space to re-intensify. That happening will make this a whole lot worse because not only would you still have the heavy rain issue, you'd also add more wind and add more surge into the mix, keeping that rain bogged down and also adding more damage potential. So the worst case scenario would be Debbie moving somewhat like, I need a bigger arrow. Let's get like something like this. There we go. It'd be something like Debbie moves something like this, where the storm tracks over water and then moves north. Or how would I say it? Like Debbie spends less time over land and emerges somewhere in this area and then moves up and makes a landfall somewhere along the coastline here. Right? That's the worst case scenario, because the longer it spends over water, it'll have more time to intensify again. But that might like slightly lower the rainfall totals here, but then you're bringing a stronger storm in, and you're still going to have the same effects, if not worse. So that's the main issue of that, with like Debbie as a whole right now. Besides that, if we look at like the home page, there is this system in the Caribbean. It's tropical wave that's coming due to Caribbean. It's supposed to move somewhat like this. Actually, kind of does fit, but we'll use black. It's supposed to move something like this as time goes on. And it should get somewhere into the Gulf of Mexico later into the week. So this will probably be something else to watch. This will be Ernesto if it develops. So the main thing here would be how early it would develop, because water temperatures here are completely fine for any storm to develop, for any storm intensity. The main issue right now would be how much land interaction would it get along its like wherever it develops. Where does it develop? How much land interaction will it get? How much dry air is going to be present, and how much shear is going to be present. Those are the main things. Because in the Pacific, there's a lot of activity right now. So it might not develop in the Caribbean, but the longer it takes, the better the Atlantic overall should be for development. Like, the later, like, it starts to move, the later into August it gets. So, like, probably the Atlantic, as we get towards, when it gets approaching the Yucatan, will be more favorable for tropical cyclone development than it is right now. Because it's still somewhat in a little bit of a whatchamacallit. It's still in a little bit of a sinking air phase where there's still sinking air over the basin. But as the MJO moves eastward and we start getting rising air over the Atlantic, and then that shifts over to Africa, especially when we get into the middle of the month and later, then the basin should really start opening up. So if this doesn't develop, the wave behind it is going to have a better environment, and so will the wave after that, most likely. So this wave necessarily doesn't have to develop, because there's still like more waves coming off. And as they keep coming off, the environment's just getting better over time. So eventually one of these is going to develop, and then it really depends what the steering pattern is at the given moment that's going to be pulling the storms. It's going to be pulling the storms whichever way it may be, right? Because the ridge in the Atlantic should be pretty strong, so it's unlikely that any storm would be curving out like this. It could still be possible, but it's unlikely. So most storms will probably, at least as we get further into August, I think Weather Center in Rosario talked about this. The majority of storms will probably at least make it near the islands, like the Leeward and Windward Islands of the Caribbean. And then from there, it really just depends on what the atmospheric circulation will be. Because the ridge should stay in place. It really just depends what's happening over eastern North America, or off the Canadian Maritimes if there's like a trough here or something. Although if the ridge is strong, it wouldn't be here. It'd probably be over in northeast U.S. But still, like, overall, it just really depends on how the atmospheric pattern lines up the further into peak season we go. Because right now, right now it's starting to get more favorable, and so we have Debbie here, and this should stall out here. So that might take a little bit of the heat, a decent chunk of the record warm Atlantic heat content out of this portion of the basin. Right? Try and like highlight this accurately. This should be good. Yeah. So heat should be taken out of the eastern Gulf of Mexico and the water off the southeast coast. So that water won't have as much, well, as high of a peak as it could be by peak season, which is roughly 3 or 4 weeks from now. But because it's still early August, and because the rest of the waters around are still going to be very warm, Debbie is unlikely to actually take away enough heat to actually put a real significant dent in hurricane and any tropical cyclone that gets in that region later. So while waters in this area are like 31 degrees Celsius, maybe 32, if Debbie passes through here, they might drop down to 30, maybe 29.5, but that's still sufficient for a major hurricane, don't get me wrong. So it really does depend how much heat it takes out. You know? But even still, the Gulf will probably still be open for major hurricanes later into the season. And it would still be able to rebound enough by the time peak season comes, where I don't think Debbie being there really mattered. Kind of like with Beryl, but Beryl was earlier in the season. Beryl did have somewhat of a cool wake behind it, a little bit. But because it was fast and moving, and because the water was already very warm, it didn't really matter. No, I have not. But yeah, for the Atlantic, it really just depends. For the Atlantic, it's really going to get more favorable as August continues. And then it just really depends on where the storms develop before impacts are really going to be discussed in any variable degree. Because obviously for me, I don't understand meteorology completely because I do not have a degree and I do not study it with actual research at college. I'm not there yet. So I don't know all the advanced processes that go into tropical cyclones and how land interaction, mountains, wind shear, and everything, how the complex features interact with each other. So in certain situations, there are exceptions to the rule where tropical cyclones can form and strengthen, where otherwise they wouldn't. So I don't have a complete crystal ball here. But I do know that the majority of the Atlantic is much warmer than what it should be, around 2023 levels, slightly cooler. The atmosphere is going to be more favorable for storms as we get into later in August and into September. And the atmospheric pattern, at least over the Atlantic, should guide most of the storms towards land, where the warmest water is anyway in the basin. From that point, and the African monsoon is stronger. From that point, it really depends where the storms develop, and then the specific atmospheric circulation pattern and given features on a micro scale that really will affect the storm. Because Debbie has good outflow. It's very good outflow. And it has very warm water underneath it. However, the shear is just enough with dry air to keep it from rapidly intensifying and doing a magic trick. Right now. But that might not be the case later in the season. That might not be the case. So, even though like the environment looks good, the storm still might not develop, if you understand what I mean. Or it could look suboptimal and then the storm goes haywire. Because there's more specific things to be looking at than just warm water, good outflow. There's other stuff to look at. Land interaction, How organized is the actual storm when it gets in that area? So the storm is not organized, even in a very good environment. It's not really going to strengthen too quickly until it gets that organization. Once the storm is organized, then it can really take advantage of any benefits that are given to it. But Debbie wasn't super organized when it came off the coast of Cuba. If it was more organized, it would have a lot better time fighting off that wind shear in the dry air. But because it's developing from a wave in the Gulf, it's probably not going to hit major status. Whereas Idalia, storms like Ida, storms like Laura were already well-defined tropical cyclones by the time they entered the Gulf of Mexico. Were they major hurricanes? No. But were they Category 1s or tropical storms that were organized enough? That already had the organization to them? Yeah. So if the storm has the organization and it gets into the Gulf, I could usually say that it will probably become a major if conditions are right. Like if nothing is stopping it, it will most likely become at least a major hurricane if it's organized. But if it's not organized, it's gonna take a little bit longer for all that to happen. So 24 to 30 hours is plenty of time to get you from a tropical storm to Category 5 hurricane. That's plenty of enough time. But the storm needs to be organized enough to be able to do that. And if it's not going to be able to happen. That's pretty self-explanatory. If it doesn't have the organization, it just can't do it. We'll transition to this for a little bit. And then I'll probably end the stream after. So, in the United States right now, COVID-19 transmission is high. Approaching very high. At least if you look on like the right side of the screen, you set these values here for viral activity. The virus right now is higher than the majority of what it was at the peak of last year's summer surge. Although it's not summer surge, it's summer wave, to be more accurate. Because even back here, the peak, the Northeast is like where it is, almost where it is now. And it will probably be much higher in about a month or two. A lot of these scores here are rivaling what we had during the JN1 wave of December of winter 2023-24. And that variant evolved from BA 2.86, which was a COVID variant that evolved inside of a patient and became a chronic infection for at least a year or two. I think it was BA2 was spreading in 2022, late 2021, 2022. So that chronic infection lasted at least a year, and then the variant that developed inside the person was able to escape from them, and because it's already adapted to cause more chronic illness, it's better at escaping the immune system by default. So it's better able to get around the immune system and avoid the antibodies that it produces. And since by general nature that COVID-19 isn't the virus, that's the disease. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. Because the virus itself, immunity to it isn't actually that good. It wanes pretty quickly. It's enough to keep the death rate and the severity low. But that's not because the actual virus got milder. It's because of the infections keeping a temporary amount of immunity just enough to not have a severe infection, per se, but not really enough to prevent people from actually getting infected over and over again. Which, if you're getting COVID, makes it more likely to get it again. Because of the effects on the immune system that does to people. Sorry guys, I just have to check what the dog was doing. Just have to check the dog, that's alright. But since COVID does modify the immune system, right, and is able to get around it and damages it in some way, where you have less T cells to be able to actually less T cells available to fight other viruses because COVID keeps it reactivated all the time. There are two sides to that coin where like death rates are lower because COVID keeps the immune system hyperactive at all times. So other diseases like influenza, for example, that would normally be killing more people right now are killing less people because the immune system is so alert. But because immune system exhaustion is also a thing, because the immune system cannot be hyperactive forever, because it's very detrimental to humans. You also have immune suppression in a way, where SARS-CoV-2 is able to suppress the immune system and allow itself to replicate in people, and also weaken it so other viruses get in more easily to people. So some people might actually have more severe RSV. This has actually been like tested like after COVID because of how it damages the immune system. But looking from like an excess death perspective, especially for like people aged like 45 to like 54 in the United States, in that age bracket, excess death is right at 0 or even a little bit lower in the negatives because the amount of infections that they're getting is keeping the immune system at such a hyperactive rate that other viruses or other infectious diseases cannot get enough of a foothold inside of them to cause severe enough illness to kill them. So that makes sense. Looking at this another way, from like not like a number perspective that's hard to understand, but from a graph that's easier to understand, because this actually shows actual like estimated case numbers based off wastewater data that's taken from the CDC and from biobot.io, where wastewater is sampled on a given date and then it's sent to a laboratory and they analyze how much virus is concentrated inside the wastewater sample, and that allows them to detect how many people are ill at a given moment, are probably going to be ill at a given moment in the city. And it also gives variant data if they sequence it, where it can tell how much of the wastewater was X variant or X variant, or maybe they find a cryptic lineage that's not spreading throughout the population, but because it's replicating in one person enough, it's able to be registered, and it could possibly be another variant of the virus that jumps out of the chronic state inside of a person, one singular individual, and then jumps out into the wider scale to be a variant of COVID-19 that's not recognizable to the human immune system. So somewhat like what BA 2.86 and JN1 was last winter. Because it's also a lot, the infection, like an infection that's chronic, has a different behavior than just COVID that people catch regularly in society. Because the infections that people catch from other people that are like widespread, the virus behaves differently in that situation because it's designed to get from another person to another. So it's going to try and involve specific traits to infect more people. Because right now, because there are no one's really mitigating the virus except for the informed people who care, except for those people, like myself. Except for them, the virus is more concerned with actually trying to mutate to become more infectious, which it's been doing consistently. But its effective infectiousness is lowered by how many people had been recently infected. So that's why you have these natural decreases in coalition with in coalition with usually the arrival of spring and lack of harsh weather, and more people outside. So human activity plus variance, plus previous immunity affects how COVID transmits. So the best way to predict how COVID is going to transmit is human activity, predicting new variants coming based off how many people were just recently infected and what variants are recombining or chronic infections. And also what the weather in a given area is like. So, for example, in a place like Florida, where winter isn't necessarily cold, but more people start spending time inside anyway due to holidays, stuff like that, they also have a winter surge. But because the summer is where most people are actually staying inside because it's that hot, that's the time of the year where you would expect the biggest surge in a state like Florida. Because it's so hot outside, more people are staying indoors in the AC. That allows the virus, which is naturally better in indoor conditions, to spread more easily, right? Not saying it can't spread outdoors. It easily can, especially when people are singing or at protests or when people are like exercising, especially like that and in crowds. Because air circulation outside is important as well if you're trying to actually not get ill. But from a general perspective, when there's more people outside, usually the amount of COVID transmission goes down because COVID is much better at transmitting indoors because the higher CO2 concentration makes less of the virus decay in the air and there's less places for the virus to be dispersed. So that's why usually at least for the United States, it's not a seasonal virus, but what the trends we have noticed are that at least in the winter is when you have your highest peak because most people are staying inside, especially in the northern states. This is also true for Europe as well. But as you go into spring, a large amount of people were just infected, so the amount of people that the virus can currently infect is lower. So transmission drops because of that. More people are outside because the weather isn't as harsh, so that also diminishes viral spread. But because the virus immunity wanes quickly, and because its infection rate is high enough, COVID-19 is not a virus that disappears within its lull periods. COVID-19 lull periods, at least in terms of infections, is comparable to what flu would be during flu season. It's never truly at a low point. It's never truly at a low point of transmission. The lowest you might have, at least nowadays, is probably around 0.5% of the population is actively infectious. But that is probably the lowest you'll be at. And that's pretty typical for what the flu would be during peak flu season. So already you have more infections in the low period. And you also have large waves for the rest of the year outside of that. So you have your summer wave into the early fall, that happens, and there's no other viruses to compete. So if you're sick during these times, it's most likely COVID that you have. And then afterward, around October, November, at least in the U.S., it's different based on your country. But in the United States, it's usually, you have a plateau that's higher than your lull, but a little bit lower than your peak, than the peak that you just had. So you have medium to high transmission for about a 4 to 6 week period right after the peak. Well, when the peak actually really ends, because when you hit the peak, you still have 50% more of infections to go. So like the peak last year, summer, was in it was like early September last year. And then the plateau was in October, mid-October to about late November. And then we have the big spike. A lot of ways to like interpret that is that summer in the South is a big proportion for a lot of us, but also especially as you're getting toward August, September, which is like right now, schools begin opening, and that's a large source of infections. Because school is where people from all across the community interact with each other. And schools are also tend to be poorly ventilated. And they also tend to be where like town hall conferences are held. There's not just students there. Basically everyone in a community is connected to a school in some way. So, the majority of infections for like parents, for example, are not going to come from their workplace. Although the workplace is a very good place to spread the virus, the majority of their infections are going to come from their children, who pick it up at school and bring it home. And then those parents go out and spread it throughout the workplace, and the cycle goes on and on and on until you hit a peak, a critical mass where it starts going down again, but never enough to the point where transmission is low. So it leads to the big spike, at least in hospitalizations and stuff, for younger people in August, September, and then it plateaus below everyone else again. The winter peak is pretty self-explanatory. That's also when the flu and RSV also come in, so it's harder to tell what you have. But by that point, it's colder outside if you have a place that has winter. More people are indoors because people can't stand the cold or they don't want to deal with it. And there's holidays like Thanksgiving in the United States, Christmas, Halloween, those types of holidays, and other religious ones that all occur at the end of the year. And in a year like this, the United States is an election year, so a lot of people are going to be going to the polls. So that's going to be another factor. And then you have New Year's, transition to New Year. You have a lot of events at the end of the year, especially from August onwards, at least in the U.S., where transmission can get very high because you have so many events where people are traveling and intermixing and are becoming more indoors because the transition from a hot summer where people are on with AC to a fall and winter where it's cold and people are inside is very quick. And it's not like spring because summer can end in about a week or two. And then you're right into hoodie weather in about 2 or 3 more weeks, and then you're inside. That leads to a lot of transmission. That will lead to a lot of transmission, especially since the virus also spreads better when it's colder. That will lead to more transmission, and that explains the winter peaks that we have here in 2020, 21, 21, 22, 23, 20, 22, 23, and 23, 24 here. The summer waves, I also explained earlier, but in 2020, you didn't really have a summer wave except for in the southern United States. In 2021, you did have a summer wave, and this was Delta, and this killed about 300,000 people. We don't really count deaths as much after 2022 for political reasons, but just in general, the general rule is not always true for a summer wave, because you can have one in June start early like we have like this year if you have a new variant coming along. So if you have like a new variant coming like right after winter, because usually transmission is lower in the spring and early summer. But if you have a new variant, that gets rid of that. So those also become spreading events. So then you get a situation like 2022, where there's not really a point in the year where transmission is low except for this lull down here. You don't really have one. You come off this large peak, you go straight down in spring, and then you go right back up. And it's also like when mask mandates and stuff like that ended. So you have this where transmission just stays high for the rest of the year. At least in 2024, there was a large peak in the winter, and that's come down like through March, April, and May, but the virus was already spreading rampantly in Hawaii in June, so they started their uptick around like late April into May, and now it's August, and we're already higher than last year at about 902,000 infections a day, and we'll probably be around 1.3 million infections a day, which this, I think JP Whelan has, I think it's Whelan, has his predictions a little bit lower. I think Michael Holger has his numbers a little bit higher. But you can get the idea that by the time you get to September, it's not going to be 900,000 people infected. You're going to look like more like 1.1 to 1.2 million people infected per day. So you're going to be at a top 5 wave, because we have 4 of these. So you're going to be at a top 5 wave. So you're going to be in the top 90% percentile of infections a day, of transmission overall. That's not good, because this also keeps your ceiling much higher in October and November, which are typically a little bit lower than like September. So like if you need to get urgent care or something that, well, not urgent care, if you need to get something that's not urgent done, you could do it in October, November with much more increased precautions than you would in like spring. But even still, you should keep precautions all the time. But your risk encounter is going to be higher in this type of scenario because the base that you're coming off of is much higher. So you're going to have a much higher base of infections, not base, a floor of infections that you're going to be rising off of once you get into winter. So you don't have the same safety as you would have had like last year, for example. You don't have it. And I remember how bad last year was here. It was terrible. This is not good. This is bad. Because you already eclipsed every 2020 wave killed. You eclipsed Delta and you eclipsed this summer wave last year. You're getting into the top. So, I mean, especially like on average, people are getting the virus 12 and a half months. Every 12 and a half months, basically every year. And we know the long-term effects of it. Plus, it's increased, like, it makes your risk for stuff like strokes and heart attacks increase. And it does neurological damage to people, where it affects your brain, your ability to hear, see. Because if it affects your taste and your ability to smell, it's affecting your sensory nervous system. So it's going to affect the other ones as well. So, because the virus affects everything in the body, and infection rates are high, this doesn't bode too well. Especially economically, because more people who are still healthy are going to be overworked. And then people who do get sick are going to be less reliable at actually getting stuff done. And they're going to have more health problems. Plus, you have vaccines, but not many people are taking them because no one's really informing them about them. And plus, they're behind by a full variant, because JN1's pretty much gone, but that's what they're vaccinating for, in addition to KP 2 and 3. But if we did predictive vaccines instead of reactionary, we'd be in a much better place with this one. If you count all that in together, it's not a very good picture as you go into 2025. Especially considering like November election stuff. There was a surge in Spain and Portugal earlier this year. There are widespread surges happening in Europe right now as we speak, as well as with the Paris Olympics happening. So this isn't good. It's gonna be another one of those one of those dark winters, I feel. Good thing is, severity of infections seems to be down, but don't read too much into that since, like I mentioned before, that's due to infection like partial immunity, not due to the actual virus getting any less virulent. And because the virus is mutating at a much faster rate now, it's starting to really tick up now, I don't see that staying that way for too much longer. So, combining the hurricane season, this, geopolitical issues around the world, it's going to be a really tough rest of 2024. It's going to be a really, really rough rest of 2024. Now that I think about it. And going into 2025, it's going to get really rough. Hey, Squid 05, what's going on? But yeah, it's going to get really rough. If you have like too many people are ill, and then you're having a chronic illness on top of that epidemic, you have another chance of another pandemic growing out of this. You have climate issues worldwide right now that are a big problem. With like fires, and you have a ramping up Atlantic hurricane season. Plus ice melting in the Antarctic I see ice levels in the Antarctic at almost record low levels. Plus the other stuff that's happening. Like, not like Earth things. This isn't an Earth thing, this is a biological thing. But just like human matters that are happening. This is also like a year where most countries have elections. This isn't really a good time, to be fair. It's not like you can't do anything about it. Like, you could definitely prepare for hurricane season. You could definitely prepare for this. For COVID. You could definitely prepare for these things and be well prepared and be decent. And try to help, like, inform people and stuff like that. Which might be a little bit harder. But just saying, like, overall, the rest of the year is going to be pretty rough. It's going to be pretty rough for everyone globally. Just thinking about it. It's going to be rough. It's going to be rough. But I mean, other than that, that's all I wanted to talk about. But if you guys have anything you want to talk about, just let me know and I'll mention it. I'll probably do like one of these streams like every like 2 to 4 weeks maybe. I plan to also like upload more videos and actually play Splatoon more on the channel. I'll probably get back into that soon. But yeah, what do you guys have? Any questions? Or if you guys don't have questions, what did you guys do today? Is my question. Because for me, I was mostly playing Civilization 6 the entire time. I was able to win 2 Civilization 6 games today. I was able to win a religious victory as... What did I win it with? I was able to win a religious victory as Arabia. And I was able to win a diplomatic victory as China on the True Start Location Earth map earlier today. Those were very fun. I liked it. I liked playing those. Those were like great. The games take a bit long because I'm not super great at Civilization to the point where I can beat a standard game in less than 200 turns. I'm not good enough yet to be able to do that. However, I think I should be able to get to that point eventually, because I play the game a lot. I just have to like upgrade my intensity, upgrade the difficulty, and then learn how to play the game more competitively. And I should be good at being able to speed build everything. Because I know I need to chop more forests down. I need to be more like aggressive with what I'm doing, be more tactical. It's a lot of stuff, like especially like multiplayer tips I could be looking at in tutorials to help me with that. And I think those should help me with the game. I also have a new computer, but I want to be able to actually get Civilization 6 on there with the anthology so I get every single DLC pack and use World Builder. So what I want to do is I want to plan to do a World Builder stream where I edit the Earth world map and then try and make it feel better to play. Because right now the major issues I feel with the TLCL Earth map, in my opinion, is that Japan is too small. There aren't enough islands. A lot of Caribbean islands are way too small. There's a desert in the wrong place in Brazil. I feel like there's more that can be done. In my personal opinion, I feel like there's more that can be done. And then I have to fix the... whatchamacallit. What would I be fixing? I would have to fix the floodplains in the game. Because right now, the floodplains don't actually work. Surprisingly enough, they don't work functionally. So what I mean that they don't work is the floodplains on the True Start location Earth map in Civilization 6 do not work because some of the rivers only have one floodplain tile, or the floodplain tiles are too numerous, or they're positioned incorrectly. That type of thing I would have to fix to make the rivers actually flood and work. And then I plan to add more floodplains, especially to like river systems like in the United States and into China, for example. There are two major rivers, well actually three, but there's two major rivers in China that people know flood a lot. In the actual map, they don't flood at all because the Yangtze River doesn't have many floodplains on it. And the Yellow River only has one floodplain on it that doesn't do anything. So, the solution is to put floodplains all along it, up until like maybe the coastline, because I know the coastal tiles need to flood for China. They need to flood. So, I'll keep that, I'll make sure that the coastal tiles there flood. So there won't be any floodplains along the coastal tiles, just to ensure that the rivers do not flood, is my plan. But I will add more places where there will be flooding into China. I'll make sure Japan is bigger. We actually add maybe a mountain or two to make it a little bit more realistic. Maybe add a mountain, a volcano there. That'd probably be smart. Maybe for India we'll change some floodplains to make the river system operate a bit better. Add more floodplains into India. We'll add more floodplains into Europe, especially. Europe floods more. We have to add more floodplains there. Okay, another change I would make. The Bering Sea is too deep. There needs to be another island inside the Bering Sea, but there needs to be ice there. So it needs to be shallow coastal water. But there needs to be ice that separates them, so you can't just cross from Asia to North America or vice versa. You have to wait until climate change kicks in enough for the shallow coastal water to melt. And then once that melts, you will be able to move through both places without needing without needing a advanced shipping like cartography. But I think at that point you kind of still need cartography, if you're going to be honest. By the time you have climate change in game, you have cartography already. Everyone already has it. So there's no real point to doing that. But I think it'd just be fun. It'd make it more realistic, to be fair. Just have these two islands there and maybe have a shallow water basin there. But you can't reach North America because there's sea ice along the Alaskan or Siberian coast. Be so good. And then make Siberia a little bit bigger. Make it a little bit more realistic. Add keep the ice on the northern part of the map the same. Keep that, but have a northwest passage, inside the map, on the northern coast of the map. That way, you can actually do the northern sea route thing later in the game. That would be cool. You know, you don't have to, whatchamacallit, you don't have to go to a canal that someone has. You can just go around the top of the map. You just have to be friendly with your neighbors, kind of thing. And then the Caribbean, I tend to make deeper. Gulf of Mexico, I tend to make deep. I want to make deeper. Want to add more islands to the Caribbean. Add Bermuda in. Maybe get the Bermuda Triangle. Make the Western United States actually a little bit better. It's not too great right now. Try and make it a bit better. Make Hawaii bigger. It's a lot of plans I have to do. I want to do. And then eventually I want to make sure that we have our own map for like lore purposes that I'll make. And I want to make that map really fun and like really realistic. Also, we'll probably add a lot more forest. Add a lot more forest to the map. And I'll add more reefs to it as well. Alright guys, that was it from me. It's been an hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to go use the bathroom and then I'll probably just go like chill. But thank you for being on stream and listening. So if you guys have any questions, just join the Discord server and like talk to me or direct message me. Or like make a comment so you can continue talking. But I'm going to use the bathroom right now because I